2 weeks ago, we had a couple who came out to our property, and they said that they needed to talk with me immediately. They had received a phone call from someone that they knew from another province, and the man that called them was very insistent that he needed help. And when he went to them, they're members of the church here in Fuzhou, and when he called for help and asked them, they weren't exactly sure what they were going to do. And the reason that they weren't sure what to do was because this man was a witch. He was a practicing witch, and he had been a witch for his entire life. He'd been involved in the occult and in witchcraft, and he had dabbled in just about every kind of occultic activity that you could imagine. He met a woman, and they became involved in a relationship, and she too was practicing and dabbling in all kinds of occultic activity. Together, they began to have extremely demonic and scary encounters. They had become very afraid because what started out as dabbling and being involved in being able to have and create power turned into nightly assaults on their life. They were being tormented by dreams and by actual visitations and visits from demons on a nightly basis. And they began searching, trying to figure out how to get these demons out of their life. They had gone to the Buddhists, and they had gone to the Hindus, and they had gone to every religious organization that they could find in search of trying to find some relief and some freedom from the torment that they were experiencing. And they, after talking to the couple that came to our house to ask for help, after talking to this couple, they realized that they had never been to the Christians. And so they contacted this woman that they knew. The couple are newly married, and they're involved in the church, and they said that they had been to all of these places and that they needed help and asked if our Jesus could set them free. So they sent them to the leaders of the church here in our city, and they were asking for help. And the leaders knew about us and the work that we do here, and they said, why don't you try going to Mike and Deena and see if they can help. And so that's when they came out. They came out immediately to our property, and they just looked at me and said, can you help these people? And the first thing out of my mouth was absolutely. And as I'm saying absolutely, of course, things are going through my mind, but it was the only answer. Absolutely, because of what Jesus did, that freely we've been given, so freely we can give. And so we began corporately here at our home with all of our staff and friends here. We shared the story with them, and we began fasting and praying throughout the week, preparing for this meeting. The staff was so wonderful. They all volunteered to pray and to fast and to be in times of worship and intercession. And so we did that for about a week. And they flew the couple in from Guangzhou. The couple flew in. Her father, I think, is a CEO of a company in Guangzhou, and so they flew in from Guangzhou on Friday night, and they had set up an appointment to meet with us Saturday morning, and they were flying in just for the deliverance. They wanted her to be set free, and so that morning I was in prayer, and Mike and I were praying together, and I just began asking God for the prophetic. I knew that I needed to be able to speak about the secrets of his heart. And I just began to ask God to show me some of the hidden things. And so I remember I was meditating over 1 Corinthians 13 in the love chapter, and then in 14 about the spiritual gifts and about the prophetic, and just crying out to the Lord to give me something to bring to this couple. And Mike and I also, were really crying out to the Lord that He would give us love for them, that would, that it would be our love for them that would compel us to step out, and also compel them to be drawn in, that it would be, not out of a story, not out of getting a story or having a story to tell, but that our heart would be broken for this couple. And it was amazing when they walked in. It was like both of us said later, it's like we just fell in love with them as soon as we walked in, which I know is supernatural. Sometimes that doesn't always happen when you meet people, but it was like they were our children, and so they came on Saturday morning, and they just looked so full of demons. He was just even in his face, you could tell he was very tormented, very afraid. He was afraid to be left in the room alone with me. It was interesting when we asked the couple if they would, the Christian couple that brought them here, we asked them if they would go downstairs and be in intercession and worship with the rest of our team that was down there doing that during that time. And he got really afraid when he found out that they were leaving, and he was like, "No, don't leave me alone with these people." And he just said, "It's okay, it's gonna be good." And almost immediately, just saying, "It's okay, it's gonna be good," he just kind of calmed right down. And so the Lord was really amazing at giving us some very concise words. That morning, the Lord had showed me 4 or 5 things specifically. He told me that there were, I'll just tell you what I told him. When we sat down, and as soon as I walked in, I sat down and I told him everything was going to be okay. And the other couple left the room, and I didn't even say much of anything else. I just said, "Let me tell you what the Lord told me this morning." And I said, "God showed me that you had 5 spirit guides. Is that correct?" And I kept asking him, "Tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, it's okay. Just let me know. I want you to know what I felt like Jesus was speaking to me this morning about you." And I said, "He told me you have 5 spirit guides. Is that true?" And he said, "Yes, that's true. I have 5. And I said, "Jesus wants you to know that they're actually demons, that they're not your friends, that they're actually demons that have come from the enemy. And are you aware of that?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "They always pretended like they were my friends, but I knew deep down inside that I shouldn't trust them." And then I said, and he also told me the name of one of the demons, and I told him what the name was, and I said, "Is this right? Is this his name?" And he said, "Yes, that's his name." And I said, "Jesus told me to tell you that this is the leader." And he said, "Oh," he said, "I wondered if that was the leader. I wasn't sure who was the leader," but he said, but I said, is this one of their names? And he said, "Yes." And I said, "The Lord wants you to know that he's the leader of the group." And I said, and he also wanted me to tell you that every time that they asked you to do something and you did it, I saw a table that they were sitting at, a round table, and they would go to that table and they would laugh at you and they would mock you every time you did what they asked you to. And he said, "I always knew that they were making fun of me." And he's begun to kind of leaning in at this point, like he's really becoming more and more interested in what I had to say at this point. And so I said, I also saw very clearly a red door. And I said, it was a door of a blood sacrifice. And I said, and you've been asked many times to go through this door. And I said, is that true? And he said, yes. He said, every night when he turns out the lights, he sees a red door. And he said the demons are always asking him to go through the door, and they're just really encouraging him to go through this door. And I said, Jesus wants you to know. He told me to tell you that if you go through the door, you will probably never come back again. And he said, I always knew that. He said, I just had this feeling that there was danger on the other side. I said, yeah, I actually saw on the other side. I saw them waiting for you. And as soon as you went through, I saw the door close and it lock. And he said, I always knew that he said, they've asked me so many times to go through the door. And he said, and I always felt like it wasn't good. It wasn't right. And,